What's up guys, today I'm going to show you how to do a bald fade. So this client, he's a friend of mine and he's got that, afro curly textured hair that I know a lot of you beginner barbers have trouble with. So first things first, you want to take a hair pick and pick out his hair. You really want to make sure that you stick it in really deep and get it down to the roots of his hair and pick it out. That way you really comb out the hair in the true length that it sits. You also want to take your comb and comb the hairs out on the side just to reset all the hairs and make sure you're able to cut it all evenly. Here I'm taking my clipper open actually. So we're doing a bald fade, but I'm taking my clipper open because it's just easier to fade out. You can do this with your clipper closed too, but I just felt like doing it with my clipper open and I'm the one teaching you, so you should listen. But it just makes it easier to fade out that bald guideline when you're starting this way. And you want to make this consistent all the way through the head. So here I'm taking my trimmer and now I'm setting in the real bald guideline. And notice how I'm not setting a really harsh line because I don't want to work harder than I have to. And this makes it a lot easier to fade out that bald guideline when you're doing it this way. Oh, here's another thing. So you see all those hairs underneath the guideline? Make sure that that's bald. Even if you don't use the foil shaver, at least make sure that it is completely bald with your trimmer and it's all consistent, because on my TikTok series of analyzing haircuts, a lot of you beginner barbers, you like to leave stubble on the side of your client's head. And when people want skin fades, they want it down to the skin, real short. Oh, and see how I'm cutting the sideburn there? You guys gotta get rid of that if you're doing a bald fade. I don't care if they have like the straggly beard that they're trying to grow in. Nah, convince them to get rid of it because that doesn't look good. If you can't grow a beard, don't grow one. I'm really taking my time here making sure that it's really bald in that area. So now I'm taking my foil shaver. Now I'm really getting it down to skin. So you have to be careful with the foil shaver because some people are really prone to razor bumps, and cutting the hair this close to the skin is one of the reasons why that happens. So I like to make sure that I ask every client that I use this on for skin fades and skin tapers if they're prone to razor bumps. It takes a second to ask. Otherwise, man, the amount of stories I've heard of people not going to a barber because they got bumps on their skin, I hear that pretty often. So yeah, make sure you just ask. It takes like a second. So now I'm taking my TPOB play, which is, by the way, the greatest clipper of all time. Use code NOIR for 15% off to pissedoffbarber.com. Instead of using my clipper open, I'm closing it halfway. That way we can start to work on getting rid of that first guideline. So I'm working one guideline at a time. That way we don't get lost in the fade. There's no point in starting with your clipper open because we made this initial guideline with our clipper open. So I started it halfway and I'm working on that guideline, and you can see that I'm constantly flicking out all the time. Flick, 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 because I don't want to create another line. Again, I'm a pretty lazy barber. And so I don't want to create another line that I have to put in more work to fade out. So here, as you can see, I zoomed it in so everyone can get a better view because I got no camera, man. I got to do this myself. And now I just close my clipper. I'm not playing too much between the 5 clicks that the TPOB play has. I'm just going straight to business. I'm going closed. But I'm able to do that because I'm flicking out so much. And so now we're really just attacking that line so we can get this blend going. Notice how I'm every couple strokes, I'm always brushing. Every couple strokes you brush, because you want to make sure that you have a clean canvas every time you're fading. And especially with this hair texture, the hair moves. Every time you cut it, it moves. So you gotta brush it down into the direction it grows to reset it. That way you're getting an even cut and an even blend. So you can see that line is basically done. So here I'm taking my number 2 and I'm setting my foundation and guideline for the rest of the fade and the shape that I want on this haircut, because I don't want to take this fade too high where it gives him a weird head shape. And so that's why I'm using my number 2. And again, I'm flicking out and I'm flicking away from his head because I don't want to dig in too much and have to raise the fade up high and make his head look weird. I mean, he's already got a pretty weird looking head. So, and you can see now I'm using my comb. I'm using my comb because the hairs are longer. In the shorter section, usually from your 0 to your 0.5, I'll be using my brush. But when the hair gets longer like this, I like to use my comb. It just does a better job of resetting the hairs back into place. So now I have my 1.5 guard, and I think, I start with my clipper open, and I'm just, doing the same thing. I'm just blending out the harsh guideline that's there. And I like to use the corner of my blades a lot when I'm doing this. And as I'm going down and I can hear that the clipper's not cutting anymore, I'll close my clipper, because then obviously you're not cutting any more hair. So you want to cut more by closing your clipper. And so again, I'm constantly flicking out, constantly combing and stroking, combing after every stroke of clipper, and just working on fading out that line. Here, I'm blending downwards with my 1 guard now, and I started with my clipper open. You see a pattern here? Every time you're fading, you want to have a system and stick with it and master that system before you move on and try any other fancy way of cutting hair. And this is just one of the ways that I like to fade. So now I'm fading down to that 0.5 guideline essentially. So again, this is my 1 guard. I start with it open. You can see I close it halfway. I'm using the corner of my blade and blending out, combing the hair, giving it a few couple cuts, and then combing it again. Because look, instantly, as soon as I go through 1 stroke, it moves. You know, the hair likes to move around. It's what it does. So it is very, very important, especially when cutting this type of hair texture, that you're always combing the hair. Here's just another angle of it so you can see where we're at on the fade. So now I have my 0.5 guard. And again, the same thing. I'm using it, my 0.5 guard open, and just really attacking that line, combing the hair, using the corner of my blade to really just start blending it out. Now, there's a trick, because this fade is clearly not done, but we've already gone through all the guards. And there's a trick when cutting afro curly textured hair. So you can see I'm pointing out the line that's still there. Now to some of you beginner barbers, you would be happy with this fade and you're gonna line him up and send him his way. And honestly, like, yeah, it's not like super smooth, but there's a little bit of a fade and you'd be good to go. But you know, there's more work to be done here. And I'm gonna show you. So what you do is now I'm gonna go back to my number 2 guard and I'm going downwards with the grain now to start smoothing out that line. Because as you can see, it's almost combing the hair down as you're cutting it, and it just helps create like a very, very smooth blend. And when you're cutting downwards with the grain with a 2, it's not really cutting it down to a 2, it's cutting it to like, I don't know, a 3 or a 4, just not a 2. But that's not where we end anyway. Here I take my 1.5 guard, close. You can start with open, but here I have it closed. And I'm just going downwards, really attacking that area and smoothing it out. And same thing here. Now I take my 1 guard open. Do you see, like, this is not rocket science, guys. This is just, you're just cutting hair. There's a system in place and you just do it until it looks good. So here again, I start with it open. I'm still combing the hair as I'm cutting it because it is important, like I said earlier. And I'm just really working on smoothing out that blend. Now, so you're looking at this blend, yes, is it smoother? Yes, but it's still not done. It's still not consistent, because if we drew these lines, you can see that here is light and then this whole section is still kind of dark. So you want to make sure, and because I noticed that it's still not smooth in that section of the fade, I flip my clipper and work on, you know, blending that area and smoothing it out even further. And I switched guards because I was cutting it and I noticed it wasn't really cutting nothing. And I could hear my clipper, it was barely cutting anything. So instead of wasting time trying to force it to cut, I just switched guards to the next lowest guard. And I have now my 0.5 open, and I'm just using the corner of the blade, and I'm just blending and combing, stroking and combing, whatever you want to call it. It's what you gotta do. So here I have my blade open again, because this is all detail work now. The detailing of the fade is where, you know, the fade really starts to shine. And what I'm looking for when I'm detailing is little dark spots. And as you can see, when you zoom into these certain areas, you can see there's a couple little dark spots where the hair is just is closer together, creating those little dark spots. And that's what creates inconsistencies in the blend. So what do? You just take the corner of your clipper with the guard to be safe and attack it with the corner of your blade very gently, just because, you know, you don't want to make a line or anything. You're just making the blend smooth and making the transition really smooth. So if you ever see like barbers doing this on TikTok or Instagram and when it looks like they're just rubbing the skin, honestly 90% of them probably are, which is fine. It's just for the gram. But here I'm showing you that I'm actually making a difference in the blend when, you know, I'm not just rubbing skin here, guys. I am cutting hair. Okay, no skin rubbing here, straight cutting. But you can see that it is making a difference. So here's the other side. I'm just gonna time lapse this. There's really no point in showing you this again, but if you do wanna watch it, it's here. I'm following the same exact steps as I did on the right side, left side, right side, whichever side it was. Same exact steps. Okay, so now we're getting to the juicy part. This is the lineup. So this guy went to another barber, and this is what happens when you go to another barber and not your main barber. you get your lineup pushed way back. Mind you, we do have to push his lineup back normally just because of the way his hairline grows, but nowhere near this much. But this is what you get for cheating on your barber. But we're here to save him anyway, because I'm a good guy. So here I'm picking out his front hairline. Now, before we cut the top, I'm doing the lineup first. Why? It's very important, because when you cut the top, usually, like for this specific client, I'm gonna freehand it, right? So say I do the top first. I'm gonna take all my time freehanding it. It's gonna look super smooth. It's gonna look perfect. But then what are you gonna do when you line him up? You're gonna grab his head. You're gonna grab his head like this. And what's that gonna do to your perfectly cut top? You know, like you're gonna mess it up. So that's why I like to do the lineup first and then freehand the top. This only goes for afros, by the way. If you're just using a clipper or a guard to cut the top, you don't have to do that. But here I'm gonna taper out his lineup a little bit just to blend out his hairline, as well as, you know, he doesn't have much of a ridge there because it was previously tapered by yours truly. And so it's not too bad, but I'm just taking my number 2 guard. And I think I even go down to my number 1 guard, and I'm going downwards with the grain very lightly, just to taper out his hairline a little bit. And that's gonna help create a really sharp front lineup. So here I'm doing the lineup. You always wanna start in the middle. There's like an explanation. Some barbers like to go left first. Some barbers like to go right. I decided to go one way this day, and that's where I went. As long as you start in the middle, it should be fine. You want to double check and triple check your lineups anyway to make sure it's perfectly straight. But here I start in the middle, and you can see that I have a finger on his forehead, and that is for stability. This finger, that's for stability when you're lining up. And you can see that every time I touch him with the trimmer, I'm like dragging it down, because, you know, there's little loose hairs underneath the lineup normally that, you know, they're almost invisible, but when they're cut, it makes the skin clearer, and it does make a huge difference. But you can see, look, I am touching the top of his head. If I cut the top perfectly and I spent all that time and I go to line him up and I touch his head for stability purposes, it's just gonna mess up the top, you know? So there's just no point in doing that. Yeah, here we are. We're making this lineup super crispy. We're not pushing him back as far as the previous barber did. You can see where the difference is in his lineup to where the growth is coming back. And bro looks tired. But now from this angle, you can really see the TPOB XO trimmer, which is fire, which is a really good trimmer, by the way. You can use my code NOIR for 15% off to pissedoffbarber.com. But anyways, so you can see the difference on where he was previously lined up and where I'm lining him up. So here I'm just lining up the sides, the vertical bars, really using the corner of my blade to create that sharp line. Here's the other side, same thing. I'm kind of using like the corner of his eye as a guideline for where I want to line him up, because again, we do have to push his hairline back a little bit because of the way his hair grows, but nothing like too extreme, I don't think, at least. Don't flame me in the comments. Also, can I just say, look at the lighting on his head. Doesn't that look friggin' so good? He looks, yeah, anyway. So here we are, we're picking him out again. We're getting it real deep into his head and making sure that, you know, the hair is fully combed out. And now I'm taking my TPOB Play clipper and we're just freehanding. And here's a good shot of my forearm. That is a really like nice forearm. Okay, so yeah, here you can see I'm just freehanding. I'm not taking too much length. I just want to even it out and clean it up. You can see, man, I got shaky hands sometimes. Today was a particularly shaky hand day, but guess what? I still get the job done. It still looks pretty damn good to me. So yeah. So here too, I notice on the other side that, you know, there's a little bit of hair sticking out. So that I go to the other side and freehand that, clean it up. And look, what a difference it makes. That looks perfect. There's not a single loose hair there. Now we're using the razor just to get rid of all the stubble around his lineup, because again, we do have to push him back a bit. There's gonna be stubble there, and this really helps. You wanna make sure that you're always pulling the skin when you do this, because man, razors are sharp and it's very easy to cut someone. I've done it. It sucks. Like, I've cut myself with the razor on accident. Not a good time. So you want to make sure you're really careful in this part, especially for you beginner barbers. It does help to use shave gel or water. Here, I think I just did it dry, honestly. Look at it, it's 8 o'clock. I was tired. So here, I'm brushing him off, making sure he's clean. Now I'm just doing a little more detail work. I noticed some more dark spots in the fade. And again, I'm using just the corner of my blade here. Look how good that blade looks, by the way. That looks really good. I'm just combing out the hair, you know, doing some extra detailing because, you know, this is your body of work. This is your cut. It's gotta look good. Anyway, this is the cut. I think it turned out really good. This was really hard to film, you know, doing this by yourself, especially because I'm not used to it yet. This is my first YouTube tutorial. So you guys gotta let me know what you think of this format, what you think of the tutorial, what you think of the video, what do you think of me? You like me? Cause, well, I don't, whatever. Anyway, yeah, wow, this is a really good angle of the haircut, like perfect. But anyways, I hope you learned something today. Thank you for taking the time to watching this video. I really appreciate it. Whatever, have a good day, have a good night. Wow, that is a good cut. It's not perfect, but haircuts are never perfect unless you Photoshop